Oyinlola once again. Welcome to week 2 of our class. I hope you enjoyed the first week. Uh, this week, by the grace of God, we are going to be looking at the foundations of psychometrics. Foundations of psychometrics. Under this, we'll be talking about reliability, talking about validity, standardization, norms, classical and contemporary test theory. Those are things we'll be talking about under the foundations of psychometrics. At the end of this week, we expect all of us to be able to define what psychometrics is all about and explain its role in psychological and pastoral assessment. Number two, we must be able to distinguish between reliability and validity and also identify their major types of reliability, types of validity. Number three, you must be able to explain what standardization is all about and the use of norms in test interpretation. Also, we must be able to compare classical test theory and contemporary test theory. What is it all about and the differences between them? And the last one, critically evaluates psychological tests used in counseling and ministry context. Let me start by explain or define what psychometrics is all about. Now, when we talk about psychometrics, it's a scientific discipline that is concerned with the theory and techniques of psychological measurement. Don't forget, we are talking about psychological testing, you know, as regarding pastoral counseling. So, and when we are talking about measurement, psychological measurement, it undergirds the development, the evaluation, and application of psychological tests used to assess some construct. What are we testing? What are we examining? What are we measuring? Don't forget, we are talking about measurement of intelligence, personality, aptitude, achievements, state of mental health, and spiritual well being. So, whatever field you are working, whether as a pastor or as a professional, at this level, when you come in contact with your clients or members or people you are working with, they may come under any of these topical issues, their live issues, challenges may be under all of this. So it's our duty to be able to, assess what is going on and where are they, so that we may be able to support them as expected. All right. So in pastoral counseling and clinical practice, psychometrics provides the empirical foundation for ethical assessment, for diagnosis, for treatment planning, and outcome evaluation. So this is very important. So a test is only as useful as the quality of its measurement property. So without adequate measurement, there is no test. Test is useless without maintaining the quality of its measurement property. So this is very important. That's what psychometric is all about. Don't forget what we are measuring: intelligence, personality, aptitude, achievement, mental health, and spiritual well-being. Let's go to the next subtopic: reliability. When we talk about reliability, what are we talking about? Reliability refers to the consistency, stability, and of course, dependability of test score over time, or test items, or raters. How consistent are they? How stable are they? How dependable are they? That is reliability. So a reliable test minimizes measurement error and yield similar results under consistent condition. You maybe you serve your client a test for them to do, and you are trying to minimize measurement error and yield similar results under consistent condition. That is when you do that 2 3 times, you are getting the same result. Then you can say it is consistent, it is stable, it is dependable, then it is reliable. That's what we are talking about. And there are three types of reliability. We are talking about test, retest reliability, inter-rater or inter-observer reliability, and internal consistent reliability. When we talk about test, retest reliability, we are simply talking about the stability of scores across time, the outcome, the result you get from your measurement, from your test, the stability of that score. We call it score across time. Maybe there's a number attached to them, to each question you are asking. At the end of the day, you are able to add them together and you are getting a range of number. When this is stable across time, then we can say test, retest reliability. It's important for traits expected to remain stable, especially in personality tests. That's where test, retest reliability is very, very important. Number two is the inter-rater or inter-observer reliability. We're talking about the degree of agreement between different scores or raters. Even if you get different scores, and scorers or raters, the degree of agreement that exists between the scorers or raters, that is inter-rater, inter-observer reliability. That has to do with somebody who is carrying out the test. Okay, so what is the degree of agreement between two or three of them, or those who are doing that from the observation? And of course, the crucial in clinical interview and observational assessment. For example, you are observing a client, few people are listening to a client, or you are observing a client, and all of you are generating your scores. So they are talking about the degree of agreement between your scores among two or three people who are observers. So that is the inter-rater reliability. The third one is internal consistency reliability. We are talking about the degree to which items or the test measure the same construct. The content of your test is measuring the items you listed on your test, measure the same construct. They are saying the same thing. You have common indices, you have common, you know, outcome in your construct. There's a particular test we call the Cronbach alpha and the split half reliability. I want to go and read about it, Cronbach alpha and split half reliability. When you read the book recommended for this week, chapter 2 and chapter 3 of our textbook, you see all these things. You see it there. So the key principle under reliability is that reliability is necessary, but it is not sufficient for validity. All right, it's very important, but it is not sufficient for to determine the validity. How valid our scores are. Let's look at validity. What are we talking when we talk about validity? What are we talking about? Validity refers to the degree to which a test measures what it claims to measure and support the interpretation made from test scores. That's validity. the degree to which a test measures what it claims to measure, and support the interpretation made from test score. That's how valid that score is. The claim is correct and the interpretation is consistent. So, validity is not just a property of the test itself, but of the inferences drawn from the test score. The inferences. I know you know what inferences are, maybe outcome. I remember in those days in chemistry, we do test in the lab and we write out the inferences, the outcome of, of what you are doing. So it's not just a property of the test itself, but inference, the result you draw from the test score. There are types of validity. We have four types of validity. We have content validity, extent to which test item represents the construct domain, each often evaluated by expert judgment, right? Content validity. The second one is criterion related validity. And under criterion related validity, we're talking about concurrent validity, correlation with an existing criterion measured at the same time. And of course, predictive validity, ability to predict future outcome. They are all part of criterion related validity. And the third one is construct validity, evidence that a test truly measures the theoretical construct. Behind every construct, there is a theory. Okay? Evidence that a test truly measures the theoretical construct. So the test is in consonant with the theory of the construct that guides it. And some of the examples of construct validity is convergent validity and discriminant validity. The number four is face validity, which is the weakest type of validity. We call it face validity. So whether the test appears to measure the extent construct, it's not, it's very weak. So it has to do with what you see, its appearance, what you see. That's why we call it face validity. Let's move to the next one, standardization. When we talk about standardization, we refer to the process of administering, scoring, and interpreting a test in a uniform and consistent manner. So, standardization from the word standard. All right. So it's a process on its own. You are administering a test to somebody. You want to know whether somebody, for example, is having an anxiety or is having a problem with intelligence or personality problem, and you are administering the test to that person, and you are scoring the person, and you look at the score and you are interpreting the test in a uniform and consistent manner. That is what we call standardization. Right? So, what are the components of standardization? Uniform administration procedure. That is, what you are doing is in uniform. Okay, the procedure you are using, they are in uniform. They are just consistent scoring rules. That's another one. Consistent scoring rules. That is, you are not using double edge decisions or point or sword to. You are not double in your double face in your principles of scoring. Right? There's a consistent in the rules that guides your scoring, and of course, representative normative samples. So, standardization ensure that test results are comparable across individuals and settings, a requirement for ethical and professional practice, comparable across individuals and settings. This is very important, and we need to take note of that. When we talk about norms, norms are statistical reference points derived from a representative sample that allows an individual test score to be interpreted relative to other. Norms is a statistical reference point that is derived from the representative sample. This allows an individual test result or score to be interpreted in a relative to others. There are types of that. We have percentile rank, we have standard score, Z score, T scores, IQ score. We have age norms, we have grade norms. All these things are common type of norms. Okay. And of course, clinical and pastoral relevance norms help practitioners like you and I to determine whether a score is an average, above average, or clinically significant. It helps us to determine that. All right. Let's go quickly to classic text theory, CTT. CTT. If you have pen, you can write this down. Observed score is equal to true score plus error. Observed score is equal to true score plus error. I don't know what does that mean to you, but it's when you see a score you are observing, you know, it's not just one. It's not just holistic. It could be true and has some errors in it. That's the observed score. So when you are defining observed score without talking about the error part of it, measurement error or whatever error, that's not that's not true. So CTT, which is classical test theory, assume that each test score reflects a true score plus random measurement error. So when you remember classical test theory, just remember the formula. That is the score you have, which you observe, is equal to true score plus error. That's the classical test theory. What are the strengths of classical test theory? It is conceptually simple. Number two, it's widely used in traditional psychological testing. And number three, foundation of many established instruments. Some of the instruments we have today, classical test theory happens to be the founding father of some of those instruments we have today. It has limitation also. A part of the limitation is that item statistics depend on the sample. It depends on sample. And person scores depend on the specific test he use. And number three, limited precision across ability level. So we need to take note of that because we're going to be coming across some of all these things as we go forward. The second part is contemporary test theory. We have classical and we have contemporary. Okay. And when we're talking about contemporary, we're talking about item response theory. That's the name, IRT, item response theory. IRT, item response theory, examines the relationship between an individual's latent trait, his ability or trait level, the probability of endorsing or answering an item correctly. That's the item response theory. We're talking about the probability of endorsing or answering the item listed on the test sheet. Probability of answering or endorsing an item correctly. And that's why we call it item response. All right. One of the strengths is that item level analysis. Things are listed. Do you experience something before? How many times do you see this? Have you been this before? Those things you listed in the measurement sheet, they are called item level analysis. When you look at them, what we do with them. Test and item parameter are simple independent. It is they are under ideal conditions. And of course allows for computerized adaptive testing. You can easily, change them to electronics testing. And that is why we call it contemporary, because some of the tests we do before, we use interview, we use pencil and sheet of paper to do some of these tests before. You ask people to mark the sheets to do this, to do that. But now we have electronics, computerized adaptive testing. And that is very, very common, especially in this part of the world. We have many things, we use computer for so many things now. So some of the tests are moving away from paper. People don't carry paper around again, and we use computer, you know, computer testing these days, that we analyze the test and do everything you want to do with the test. You can just get it with, you have an iPad, you have it on the iPad, you can just do your test. Computerized adaptive testing. So that's why we call it contemporary, because it's what we do in recent time. People are moving away from paper and pencil test to computerized adaptive testing, CAT. Right. So advantage of that is that greater measurement precision. That is that we have high level of precision, flexible test construction. You can generate text as fast as possible. Strong utility in modern large scale and clinical assessment. You can use it, in a large scale. You can use it for so many people. You can do tests for many people at the same time, especially in the clinical uh, environment. Okay, the limitation is that it's statistically complex. Sometimes it can be complex statistically, and of course, it requires large samples, and of course, higher technical demands. So, if you are not conversant with the computer or the way it is being installed on the system, you may run into trouble with it. Okay, so when it comes to focus in clinical test theory, we focus on test scores. But in item response theory, we focus on item characteristics. When it comes to error, it is single estimate. But in item response theory, it is straight level precision. So these are differences between them. When it comes to sample dependence, in classical test theory, it is high, but in item response theory, it's very lower. Talking about complexity, in classical test theory, it is very low. But in IRT, item response theory, is very high. In modern applications, for classical test theory, it is limited, but in item response theory, it is extensive. What are the ethical and professional implications for counselor and some of us who are coming into pastoral counseling or pastoral caregivers? What are the ethical and professional implications of all these things we're talking about? Number one, we must use only psychometrically sound instruments. If you want to carry out your test, you want to get your information, get your scores, please, we should use psychometrically sound instrument, not just anything. Because life of people, the future of many people are in the test you're about to conduct. You can't just do anything anyhow. That's we have to be ethical in whatever we are doing as professional. And of course, number two, we must interpret scores within cultural, spiritual, and contextual frameworks. Now, in this part of the world, let me give you an example. If I'm conducting a test for a Westerner and for an immigrant who came from Africa, I can use the same instrument, the same device. I can use the same test score. Test sheet. I can use the same thing, everything. But when it comes to the cultural, they are not going to have the same cultural background. All right. Somebody who is coming from maybe Africa cannot have the same cultural heritage or background like a Westerner. So, as we interpret scores, it must be done within the cultural framework and also spiritual framework and contextual framework. So we have to, otherwise, you can there will be a lot of assumptions, a lot of errors. Okay, let me give you an example of a test among children. Children here, children when they are growing up, a lot of things are introduced to children here in the Western that makes children, more intelligent when they are younger. But when you consider somebody who is coming from an immigrant who is coming from other part of the world may not have that opportunity when their child are given back to. So when you put the two child beside one another at younger age, you may see a child in the Westerner be a kind of smarter than a child that is coming from maybe Africa or other part of the world. And you'll be thinking, oh, this guy is smart, and the other child is not. All right. But if you are interpreting their test, you can't just categorize, or generalize. I just say, oh, this one is having problem, intelligence problem, and this one is not having problem. Why? Because they are raised or they were given back to from different cultural background. So you need to put in interpreting this course, you need to put the cultural background, spiritual background, and contextual frameworks into consideration. And we need to avoid over reliance on test scores without clinical judgment. That is, we must put in our clinical judgment, and we must adhere to professional standards too and scope of practice. We must not go outside our scope of practice. All right, so psychometrics provide the scientific backbone of psychological assessment. Understanding reliability, validity, standardization, norms, and test theory equips practitioners to use assessments responsibly, ethically, and of course, effectively in both clinical and pastoral context. So this is very important. So that is all we need to cover under the week 2, which we talk about the foundations of psychometrics. So these are the foundation. What we have covered today is the foundation of psychometrics. So if you follow the video I've put on your portal, and what I'm recording now, I'm going to put it there too. I'll read it very well. You should be able to answer the 5 question I will put across to you. So I've prepared the quiz. So I'm going to put it on there. It's a multiple choice questions like the one we did last week. So I'm going to put it on our platform for you to attempt. If you follow what I've explained to you and some of the information I put on your platform, you should be able to answer all these questions without any iota of doubt or unbelief in your capacity. So thank you for watching this. Thank you for listening. So I hope you'll be able to read all the tests we have prepared for this week. Please read those chapters and the other books, and let's see what you're taking away from this foundation of psychometry. And I will talk to you again next week. All right. Take care, everyone. Thank you for listening to this. Take care.